Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are big news, and that's why we're out at the Blockchain and Bitcoin Africa Conference to find out what the deal is and why digital currencies should matter to you. So Bitcoins, blockchains have been incredibly interesting buzzwords and are going to be even more important going to the future. So it's really changed the game up, and we're checking in with Marcus Swanepoel, who's one of the co-founders of BitX. Let's start at the very beginning. What is a Bitcoin? What is a blockchain?
All Bitcoin really is that someone invented the technology that makes it possible for the first time to send digital ownership directly from one person to another person without an intermediary, right? And that's quite profound if you think about it. If you think about the financial services industry, how many companies in the world actually just charge transaction fees moving things between people? This technology allows you for the first time to eliminate that middleman and move things directly from one person to another.
Blockchain.
Blockchain is what people popularly refer to as the technology that underpins this concept that I've spoken about, right? So blockchain is the way that you move all of this stuff, and Bitcoins is the currency attached to it. So you can move your Bitcoin on top of this blockchain technology.
As keynote speaker at this event today, your topic was banks of the future. Give us a little nutshell version of your touch points.
For one, I think the way we see banks and how they work today, it's going to be very different in the future. Part of the banks of the future is that the banks will become more like a Skype or a Gmail, and a critical enabler for this is blockchain technology or Bitcoin. The overarching theme is about making money frictionless and living in this world where it's just really easy to use money.
It's just so mind-blowing to think that, you know, we've seen certain banks go through evolutions and become more tech-savvy, but like you say, you still feel that they are slow in some cases.
I would like to say, yes, the banks will be able to reinvent themselves to be a bank of the future, not just around frictionless money, but many other structural and cultural things that need to change for them to be able to compete with a Samsung Pay or Google Wallet or Apple Pay. These banks of the future probably are going to have to be built from scratch. And there's a technology aspect of it. So if you want to do all the things that the banks must be able to do to survive, the technology is going to have to be very different, and it's very hard to replace everything that you already have. But even more importantly is the culture, right? If you have a culture of people moving fast, being very close to their customers, being very innovative, being able to work across many countries at the same time, different languages, different localization very quickly. Very hard for example, a local bank in one country or even some of the international banks to move this big ship in that direction. But for them to completely reinvent themselves to compete, it's going to be very, very hard.
Right. Tell us a little bit more about the hunted Satoshi.
So Satoshi Nakamoto is the so-called founder of Bitcoin. No one knows if it's a person or a group of persons. It's just a pseudonym. Now, I think there's a big misconception. People think that this guy or these people just invented this crazy new technology out of nowhere. But it's not really true. If you read the paper, just like any other good academic and science papers, it refers to a lot of other work that's been done. And this issue that they solved is actually computer scientists and mathematicians and cryptographers have been trying to solve this for about 20 or 30 years. And so Satoshi managed to just pull all of this research together and really build on the shoulders of giants. No one knows who Satoshi is, where he is. It was released anonymously. He obviously doesn't want to be discovered because it doesn't really matter, right? It's I think the technology is bigger than, you know, the person or the group of people that invented it.
Oh my goodness, Marcus, we could sit here talking to you for days, but we have to go. So while the hunt continues for the mysterious Satoshi, we'll just be here being cool kids and trying to adapt our lives to Bitcoins and blockchain. Well, we've really started dissecting the terms and what Bitcoin and blockchain means and how it all operates. But now we're going to get stuck into regulation. So we're chatting to Adrian Domiser, Director of Domiser Attorneys. Chat to us about Africa versus the world and what this means for regulation with Bitcoin.
Thanks, Danine. It's a very interesting question because Africa's had a lot of experience with cash alternatives. And for example, the e-money industry in Africa is vibrant, and it's had an incredible effect on African economies. You look at individual countries that have been completely transformed by the ability of people to use cash alternatives. And as a result, African central banks are actually quite experienced with regulating cash alternatives because it's got a huge value to the country and they've been predominant in terms of usage. So there are lessons that you can take from the regulations of e-money and apply those to how the regulatory process for Bitcoin might go.
If we look at Africa versus the world, what do you think the benefits are to regulate this practice? And would it just be a central opinion and set of rules that gets issued on a universal platform?
That's essentially the challenge that we face. So with e-money, it was a relatively clear challenge. The challenge was that you give your cash to a counterparty, that person holds the cash, and then you can go and spend your e-money anywhere you want. But if that counterparty goes insolvent, then you can't spend that cash anyway, because no one will accept the cash. So that's different to Bitcoin. Bitcoin, if you hold a Bitcoin, it's typically something you can transfer for assets anywhere in the world, not just on one counterparty's platform. So it's a slightly different issue to regulate here. And the two primary concerns are the market value of Bitcoin. The other important area to consider very carefully is the anonymity of Bitcoin transactions. And people are very concerned that illicit or illegal or criminal people might actually just demand that payment be received in Bitcoin because it can't be tracked. That's not actually true. Every Bitcoin transaction can be tracked because somebody in the Bitcoin chain, be it a Bitcoin exchange somewhere along the line, will know the identity of everybody. However, are they cooperating with the regulator? And that's really what the regulator needs to consider in terms of the extent of the regulation.
Thank you so much for chatting to us, Adrian. And it's great to know that Africa is well placed to use and recognize non-cash alternatives. We're taking a moment from the madness to chat to Sonia Kunal, who is the organizer of the Blockchain and Bitcoin Africa Conference 2016. Right, got that out of the way. Different city this year. How has it grown and why did you choose to change it up?
Sure. So we hosted our first conference in 2015, in April 2015, in Cape Town at the waterfront. And it's grown a huge amount since then. With this conference, the numbers have increased largely. We sold out. And the crowd is quite different as well in terms of who's represented here in the audience today. So there's a tremendous amount of interest. We're finding that the financial institutions are very interested in blockchain technology, and they are really taking this technology very seriously, and they're building a lot of applications using blockchain technology.
Why the need for this conference?
We found that there's a lot of misinformation about blockchain and Bitcoin and digital currencies in general. And we thought we wanted to go on an education drive in Africa, and specifically South Africa. And we therefore want, to educate people in Africa specifically on the opportunities that this all provides them.
Sonia, thank you so much for chatting to us. No doubt you've got to get back to the conference and organizing duties. We are checking out now and over to Hypertext Africa for yet another awesome review. And then we're back with more talking cryptocurrencies. Now, there's regulation and then there's the law. So we are chatting to William Frenson, who is a federal prosecutor for the U.S. Attorney's Office. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Now, dark web, all of the bad stuff that could possibly happen in a system with Bitcoin and blockchain. Tell us more.
Different crimes that are committed flock to all different kinds of being able to make exchanges. This has, unfortunately, Bitcoin in particular, other forms of virtual currency, have gotten a lot of attention when they're utilized for some sort of criminal purpose. But the issue comes up when there's sort of a notoriety about a particular way of committing these crimes, profiting off of the crimes, and people think that it's either anonymous, which there's some truth to, or untraceable, which there's a lot less truth to in general when you're talking about Bitcoin.
So it's still quite a process to get certain things regulated. And then what kind of leg do you have to stand on with the shaky law that surrounds it as well?
With regard to a lot of the activity, take Silk Road, for example. Silk Road was a online place of exchange, largely for narcotics, although other illegal goods were sold. People had to create accounts, they had to utilize Bitcoin, and they accessed it through Tor, the onion router on the dark web. When that case was taken down, The charges involved there were narcotics charges. There has been some additional attention to potential violations based on virtual currency. And the idea is basically that we don't want to end up where virtual currency exchanges can become a vehicle for the proceeds of illegal activity or financing terrorism without any sort of regulation at all.
William, what is your take on this movement?
I can say that from our perspective in my office, we have gone ahead and created within my section, the Organized Crime Strike Force, a role of a digital crimes coordinator. And we have, in working with our law enforcement partners, both federal agents and local law enforcement, we have created a digital currency working group, a task force basically. And the idea there is to keep an eye on what may be next, in what way people are going to utilize this mechanism to enable them to commit crimes or to commit crimes in the first place, and try to stay on top of that. Clearly, from our perspective, this is something that is going to be part of the future in one form or another. Whichever currency wins out, it'll be something that's sort of there in the future, is utilized by criminals in the future, and so it's something that we thought was important to create a role and keep an eye on that.
William, we know your time is precious, so thank you so much for chatting to us and shedding some light on law enforcement in digital currencies.